Now, I started getting into slide about 5 years ago, and it's quickly become one of my favorite ways to play the guitar. But I've noticed that most people who pick up slide don't stick with it. They never make it past the basics of playing a slide on their guitar. And for good reason. Playing slide can be really difficult, and it goes against everything we know as guitar players. But if you're at all familiar with Duane Allman, Derek Trucks, Sonny Landreth, Joey Landreth, Ry Cooder, Ariel Posen, or any number of other incredible slide guitar players, you know what's possible when you can unlock that style of playing. So today, I'm going to teach you the basics of slide guitar in 5 easy steps. Step 1, pick a slide. Now, this is the part of the process that I think most people who are starting out overlook. You go to your local guitar store and you just grab one off the rack that looks cool, but you should actually stop and consider what type and size of slide you should look for. The first thing to consider is material. There's typically 3 main types of slide material out there: glass, metal, and ceramic. Typically, glass slides are going to have a smoother feel and a warmer tone, whereas metal slides are going to be a little bit harsher and brighter than the glass slide. And the ceramic slide usually sits right in between the two. The next major thing to consider that most people overlook is the wall thickness. Generally, the thinner your slide is, the more control you're going to have over your playing because your finger is actually resting closer to the string. But there can be a trade-off in sustain and durability with glass slides. Thinner glass slides break easier. Whereas thicker wall slides are going to have a little bit more sustain, a little bit warmer tone, and be more durable overall, but you're going to have less control over them because your finger is sitting a little bit farther away from the string. Then after that, you want to consider what finger you're going to place your slide on. And this is something you want to try and figure out in the beginning because you don't want to be switching between different fingers because you're never going to really be able to hone in your skills. Now, personally, I like to play on my 3rd finger. That's how I've always felt most comfortable. But playing on the 4th finger is also very, very popular. The advantage of putting the slide on your pinky is it leaves these 3 fingers open to play chords or play licks. And keep in mind, when you're looking at buying your first slide, you don't have to get it right on the first try. Slides are relatively inexpensive, and if you're like me, you're going to end up with a collection of them. But generally, I like a glass slide and a brass slide. These are my 2 go-tos. Glass for when I want a warm, smooth tone, and if I'm going to be playing maybe an electric slide solo and I want a little bit more speed and control, and brass if I'm playing resonator or acoustic or even electric, but I want a raspier, rougher tone. In the description box down below, I'll have some of my favorite slides linked that I've been using for years. Next is probably one of the most important things, and that is the fit. You want a nice, snug fit on whichever finger you're going to place the slide, but you don't want it too tight. It should fit like a good ring. When it's on your finger, it's snug and it's not going to fall off, but you don't have too much trouble taking it off when you need to. Also, the length of the slide comes into play. Now, more recently, I've been using these. These are made by a company called Rock Slide, and as you can see, it's beveled on the end. And that bevel allows me to place it and bend my 3rd finger around to make it more comfortable to play. Whereas a more traditional slide shape like this ceramic slide here goes all the way down over my ring finger and makes that bend almost impossible. I can still play this slide well, but it makes me shift my wrist around the bottom of the neck, which isn't always the most comfortable thing. And it's kind of hard to get off my fingers sometimes. Step 2, pick a tuning. Now, there are several common tunings that most slide guitar players will use, and standard is one of them. You really don't have to change your guitar's tuning at all to play slide. But I would actually recommend you start with open E. And the reason is it's the easiest to transition into. And that may seem counterintuitive if you haven't played in open tunings or non-standard tunings very much, but let me explain. In standard tuning, our lowest string is tuned to E. And if you know a little bit about the notes on your fretboard, then you know where things like G and A and B are up and down the neck. But when we transition from standard tuning to open E, this low E string stays the same. It doesn't change at all. So it serves as sort of a roadmap for your new tuning. It can help you move around a little more easily than, say, something like open G, for example. Now, the best way to think about an open E tuning is we're essentially tuning the guitar to play this chord for us. It's simply an E major triad, just E, G sharp, and B. So let's tune it up. We're going to leave our bottom E string the same. Our fifth string is going to go up a whole step from A to B. Our fourth string, D, is going to go up a whole step from D to E. Our third string, G, is going to go up a half step or semitone to G sharp. And then our first two strings, B and E, stay the same. And so without playing any notes in my left hand, I've got an E major chord. Now, a quick note about your guitar. Oftentimes people will talk about the need to set your guitar up for slide playing, and this isn't necessarily a bad idea. To set a guitar up for slide, generally you might switch to heavier gauge strings and raise your action a little bit to get the strings off the fretboard. This makes it easier to play without fretting out, especially when you're learning. But I actually don't do this. I don't have any guitars that are set up specifically for slide playing. And as a result, I can play slide on any of the guitars that I own. It is a little bit more difficult to play. You have to be more conscious of not fretting out, not pressing down on the strings too hard. But overall, it allows me to play slide on any of the guitars that I own. Step 3, learn some chords. Now, this is the biggest thing I think most players skip over when they're first learning slide. You just want to get straight to ripping those sweet Dwayne Allman licks. But if you can't play any chords, you can't really play. Now, this is where the beauty and brilliance of the open E tuning comes into play. Because we're tuned to this shape here, essentially think of it as a major bar chord on the 6-string root. All we have to do to play a chord is bar on a specific fret. So for instance, here's E major. The 4 chord of the key, in this case A major, is right here. The 5 chord in the key, in this case B major, is right here. Then back up to 1, or E. Now the reality is, you would never play that chord with your finger barring the fret. Instead, you would play it with a slide. One other thing to note here is if you play the bottom 3 strings, the 4th, 5th, and 6th string together, you've got a power chord. And then when you throw the slide into the equation, it makes it a lot more entertaining to play. Now, before we talk about how to actually play with the slide, there's one other chord voicing that I want to show you, and it's one of my favorite ways to play in open E. Instead of barring across all 6 strings, what I'm instead going to do is just play the root note on the 6th string and the major 3rd on the 3rd string and leave the other strings open, and I get this A major chord. If I take that shape and slide it up a whole step, I get a B major voicing. Then if I slide up another whole step and play this shape right here, I get a minor voicing. Now you can play this for every chord of the harmonized major scale in the key of E, just switching between the major voicing, where both notes are on the same fret, and the minor voicing, where you're taking the third note and dropping it down a half step. So then that allows me to play beautiful open chords like this. Now, without a doubt, the most important element of your slide playing is your intonation. Intonation simply means playing in tune, and practicing chords is a great way to do this. Now, this is where things can get a little tricky, especially for beginners. To actually play the chord in tune, I'm not going to play in between the frets like I would if I was playing without a slide. Instead, I want to place my slide directly on top of the fret. And you can see how just a slight movement up or down the neck will completely knock the chord out of tune. So practicing your chords with the slide is a great way to start working on your intonation. Step 4, play some single notes. Being able to play single notes with a slide is one of the most difficult things that new slide players have to figure out. But the secret is in your right hand. Now, if you watch, I'm going to play some single note stuff only on the third string here. And look at how my right hand sits on the guitar. My thumb is resting against the bottom 3 strings, and my second and third finger are resting against the top 2 strings, leaving my first finger available to pick the third string. So I'm just going to play a line up and down the third string here. Now, if you notice, no matter how much I was moving up and down the fretboard, you didn't hear any of that. And that was because of the muting in my right hand. The second part of muting actually comes from the left hand or the slide hand. When I'm actually playing on the neck, I usually rest my first finger on the strings behind the slide. Now, again, I'm not pressing down, I'm not fretting at all. I'm simply just resting my finger against the strings to mute them. Now, this is another area of control that you have as a slide player. Listen to what happens when I lift my finger off the back of the slide. Get all that nice, juicy, gritty, greasy string noise. But we don't always want that. Sometimes we want nice, clean, and clear, decisive notes. And when you want that, you rest your first and or second finger on the strings behind the slide just to help tighten them up. Then after that, the next thing to start to work on is transitioning notes between strings. And this is where more right hand technique comes into play. This is a simple 2-string exercise that will teach you everything you need to know about moving between strings when playing slide. I'm playing in the 5th position here in open E, which is A. And if you look here at my right hand, you'll see the same layout I had before, with my thumb resting on the bottom 3 strings, my second and third finger resting on the top 2 strings, and my first finger available to pick the open 3rd string. Now, this is where the hard part comes in. You want to mute the 3rd string as soon as you start to play the 2nd string. Now this is going to take some practice and time to get right, but be patient. And step number 5 is work on a basic blues shuffle. We're going to use the 1-4-5 progression we talked about earlier, but we're going to add one extra element, and that is the flat 3 power chord. Right there on the 3rd fret. Now this is great because it's going to give you that really swampy, bluesy feel, especially between the flat 3 and the 4. Now you've heard that sound a million times before. And simply all I'm doing is sliding from the 2nd fret to the 3rd fret there. And then pulling off. Then do that again and slide up to the 4 chord. And then you can even do it to the 5. So if you put all that together into a shuffle, you get something like this. So that is how to play slide in 5 simple steps. If this helped you out, leave a like and a comment down below, and also be sure to check out the tone course, my first video course that I just released last week. It's linked in the description box down below, as well as all of the other links if you want to support the channel more directly. Be sure to follow me on Instagram at Rhett Shull to keep up with what I've got going on each week, and subscribe here to my YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Let me know what you want to see next in a lesson video like this. Anyways, hope you enjoyed today's video. I'm Rhett Shull, and remember, there is no plan B.